Okay, so I was kind of sitting down last night and wondering, like, okay, what should we cover on the channel? Because, I'm trying to find that perfect balance between classic DC and current DC. And the same goes for Marvel as well. But the problem was, though, I couldn't figure out what to cover when it came to classic DC. But then I realized that after Nightfall, really after you had Dick Grayson become Batman for Bruce Wayne for a short period of time after Nightfall, that DC finally gave Dick Grayson his own book. Because before Nightfall, Dick Grayson was more part of the Teen Titans than he was with the Bat family. But by Night's End, you had DC trying to push him back into the Bat books. And so after being a Night's End and also being Batman for a short period of time, it kind of let DC realizing like, hey, you know what? We should go ahead and give Dick Grayson his own book. And honestly, that was the right move. But also because there were so many Bat books back then in the 1990s. Because in the 90s, as we all know, DC was struggling behind Marvel, but also behind Image as well. But for DC, they still had one character, and that would be Batman. Like, Batman was just popular, and they had so many different Bat books. But some of those books belonged to other characters, like Tim Drake Robin and Catwoman. But for Dick Grayson, he did not have a book yet. Now, again, he was still part of the Teen Titans while you had Robin getting his own book, and the same goes for Selena Kyle. But right after Night's End, you could tell that DC wanted to give Dick Grayson his own book. But before they gave him his own ongoing series, they gave him a mini-series to kind of test the waters, to kind of see if Dick Grayson could hold a book on his own. And honestly, he showed that he could. And so as we get into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with Dick Grayson being Nightwing. Now, while out there being Nightwing, he realized that there is a young lady in danger. Now, this young lady is going to be very important for the rest of the storyline that we are covering today. But for Dick Grayson, he kind of realized that she's in danger. Now, we see that apparently she made some kind of deal with some thugs. Now, she thought the deal was going to go in a different direction. But unfortunately, they're kind of like, nah, listen, we have a new deal. We'll go ahead and kill you off and go ahead and collect the money that was promised to us. Now, luckily for her, you had Dick Grayson step in and be that hero Nightwing. Now, for me personally, I kind of love the opening pages of this storyline because it's just Nightwing being Nightwing out there beating down on some thugs, but also kind of reminding us that he was the first Robin, that this man was trained by Batman, like he can hold his own no matter what. And so you have Dick Grayson be able to take down the thugs and save the young lady's life. But right after being able to save her life, we do learn that he was being watched by Batman. Now, this conversation is really important because it's Bruce and Dick kind of like finally be able to sit down with one another. And the reason why I say finally, because when it came to Dick Grayson, he had been with the Teen Titans for a good period of time. And so for Batman, he was on his own. He had Jason Todd, he had Tim Drake, but now it's Dick Grayson being back in Gotham away from the Titans. But the thing is, it's Dick saying, you know what? I want to quit being a hero. Like, I'm officially done. Because to him, when he was Robin, he realized that, yes, he was Robin. He was Batman's first sidekick. But also, he was not himself. He was not Dick Grayson. And so that was one of the many reasons why he became Nightwing. But even then, he kind of felt like he didn't have a life that he truly wanted. And when he was Batman, he kind of realized that he couldn't be Batman. He could, but not as good as Bruce Wayne. But at the same time, he does not want to be Bruce Wayne. He is somebody who just wants a normal life. And so you have Dick Grayson say, you know what? I am officially retired. And so he takes off his Nightwing outfit and hands it over to Bruce. It says, you can keep it, store it, burn it. I don't care. I am officially done being Nightwing. Now, the following day, you had Dick Grayson go ahead and check in on the young woman that he had saved last night. And we do learn her name is Miggy. Now, when it comes to Miggy, she does play a very important role, but really only at the end of this storyline. Now, with that being said, for Dick Grayson, he does pretend that he was somebody who found her who was completely knocked out, and luckily for her, that his dear friend was a paramedic. Now, in reality, it's more of like, no, he was Nightwing, and he's all like, hey, you know what? She needs my help. I helped her, but she got knocked out in the middle of the battle. But while being at the hospital, kind of just being there, checking in on her, you did have her parents walk into the room. Now, her father will also be very important for the end of this storyline. Now, for Miggy, she's kind of like, you know what? Dick is kind of cute. I want to see him again. And so you have the two characters begin the whole idea of the possibility of them dating one another. But with Dick Grayson now being retired, is him kind of wondering what to do with his life. Now, for Dick, we jump over to his apartment, and he's been gone for a good while, so the place is kind of like a mess. Now, luckily for Dick Grayson, Alfred stops by, and you have Alfred being that great guy and begins to clean up the place. Now, you also have Alfred tell Dick Grayson that he brought some old paperwork that belonged to Dick Grayson's parents. Now, this leads into the whole idea of what we're going to see in today's story. But while you have Dick Grayson go ahead and look through the different papers that Alfred had brought over, he finds this note where apparently someone was making a threat towards Dick Grayson's parents 4 days before they were killed off. Now, this is huge because for Dick Grayson, as we all know, his parents were killed by a character known as Zuko. But it's now the book saying, like, what if it wasn't Zuko? What if it was somebody else who had killed off the parents of Dick Grayson? And so for Dick, he's wondering, where in the world did this letter come from? Now, for Dick, he realized the letter came from somebody in a different country, a country known as Kravia. Now, Kravia is just as bad as Santa Prisca, but here is the big catch, though, because for Dick Grayson and his parents, they were part of a circus, and that circus did perform in that country. And so as Dick say, I have to go back over there to see who in the world was trying to kill off my parents, because apparently they saw something that they were not supposed to see at all. And that person had most likely got my parents killed. And so as Dick say, I'm going over to Kravia to figure out who killed off my parents. And so you have Dick Grayson go ahead and call over to the embassy so that he can get access into the country. Now, right off the bat, you have that guy tell the prince of the country, and that'll be Balsick. Now, for Balsick, he's kind of like, you said Grayson. I remember the Graysons, the parents. And so you have the book continuing the whole idea that maybe, just maybe, the people in this country are the ones who are responsible for the death of the Graysons. But either way, they said, listen, Dick Grayson is the last person we need to kill off to cover our tracks. And so you have Balsick call in an assassin to handle Dick Grayson. And that would be a character known as Good Old Bernie. Good Old Bernie. And apparently Good Old Bernie is one of the best assassins in the world. And he kind of gives an example of how great he is by killing a guy off in just one single blow. And so for the prince, this guy should be good enough to handle Dick Grayson. So you have Bernie go ahead and head over to Gotham City. And so as we get into the ending of the first chapter, we do pick up with Dick Grayson hanging out with Miggy. Now, you have the two characters on a date. It's kind of like, dang, Dick Grayson is officially retired. Like, this is a man who's trying his best to be with a woman he cares for, possibly. But while hanging out with her, you have Bernie there. And so once the date ends for Bernie, this is the perfect time to go after Dick Grayson. So he calls out Dick by his name, like, hey, Dick, I need to talk to you about something very important. And so, as we get into the second chapter of the storyline, we do pick up where Nightwing and also Miggy being right now confronted by good old Bernie. Now, for Bernie, his main goal is get Nightwing alone so that he'll be able to, kill off Nightwing. But you have Miggy say, you know what? I want to spend more time with Dick. And you have Dick say, you know what? I love the idea of spending more time with you. Let me go ahead and take you home myself. And so, unfortunately for Bernie, he's no longer able to get the chance to kill off Dick like he wanted to at this moment. But for Bernie, he's not done yet. He'll still try his best to kill off Dick Grayson down the road. Now, I do want to point out something when it comes to Miggy, because while you do have Dick and her go back to her house, where you do have Dick just dropping her off, but once again having a conversation with her father and her mother, you kind of see that Miggy is very clingy. It's kind of like she hates the idea of being alone or being left behind. And so it's her saying, Dick, like, hey, let's spend more time together. Let's have dinner together. Like, please don't leave me. But for Dick, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I got a phone call, but don't worry, I'm gonna call you. Now, there is a good reason why she is so clingy, and you'll see why at the very end of the storyline. But right after that, you didn't have Dick Grayson go home. Now, when he does go home, you have Dick realize there's something off going on in his apartment. And he realized that there's somebody in there who should not be in there. And that would be Bernie. Now, this is Bernie believing that Dick Grayson is just your regular day person. This should be an easy job for him. But that's the thing. Dick Grayson is not just your regular person. Dick Grayson is Nightwing. So you have Dick being able to hold his own against Bernie. Now, Bernie realized he has to retreat and come up with a new game plan. And so you have Dick just dip the heck out of there. Not Dick, sorry. You have Bernie go ahead and dip the heck out of there. But right after you have Bernie leave, you have Dick realize that Bernie had left behind his cell phone. Now, that right there is really important because you have Dick find out that Bernie has been in contact with, well, the country Kravia. And that tells Dick right there, like, okay, cool, you know what? I have to go now into that country to figure out what in the world is going on and what is their connection to my parents' death. But now we jump back over to the prince. Now you do have the prince be confronted by his father. Now his father is the prime minister, but you have the prime minister wondering why in the world his son, the prince, is trying to kill off Dick Grayson for. Now you have the prince say, listen, I don't need to give you an actual reason why. My word should be good enough. And apparently he wants Dick dead before a big moment that's going to kill off hundreds of innocent people inside the country. Now, with that being said, you also have the prince tell the guards to lock his father up in his own room because his father is not acting like he should be. And so it kind of shows this is somebody who's drunk on power at the moment. But getting back over to Dick Grayson, this is now Dick Grayson realizing that he has no choice but to go ahead and become Nightwing once again. But also, he must go over to Kravia to figure out why in the world they're trying to kill him off. What is their connection to his parents' death? And so you have Dick go over to the Batcave. Now, Bruce and Tim are not there, so it's only Alfred. But this kind of leads into the new era for Nightwing. And the reason why I'm saying that because he's retiring his old outfit and getting a brand new one. The one we all love in the 2000s and, of course, the 2010s as well. But either way, it's Dick realizing that he needs more information about the country. Now, around this time in DC Comics, Barbara Gordon was no longer Batgirl. She was your good old Oracle. And so she was able to collect enough information to help Dick out, to figure out how to get into the country, but to know everything about the country as well. But also find one person who could possibly help him learn more about his family. And that would be the Prime Minister. And so we do see Dick Grayson finding a way to sneak into the country. And of course, it's a good old, let's just parachute into the country. Now, while you have Dick Grayson trying to fly into the country, we see the prince go ahead with his plan to kill off a bunch of innocent people. We learn here that he's right now trying to kill off a bunch of minorities, people who are dark skinned. And so it's him saying, you know what? Y'all do not deserve to live in my country. And so he's out there trying to kill them off while you have Dick Grayson just flying into the country. But as we get into the second chapter, we pick up with Dick Grayson being able to land in the country. Now, unfortunately, he does have to fight against a few guys who work for the prince. But while trying to do that, he gets a phone call. And that phone call is from Miggy. And apparently it's her calling out for help. But the problem is the dude is now on the other side of the world. And so with her trying to call out for help, it's kind of like, what in the world is up with you? And also, like, how can I help you when I'm across the world? And so as we get into the third chapter, it's really more of us picking up where the last chapter had left off at, where you have Dick Grayson fighting against more guards that belong to the prince. But at the same time, he's on the phone with Miggy. And the thing is, she's crying out for help. And she's saying, please don't hit me. Now for Dick Grayson, he has no idea who's hitting her. And the thing is, she's not telling him who's trying to hit her. But either way, for Dick Grayson, he has no choice to go ahead and just like end the call because he hears some people nearby who are screaming out for help. Now, these people are dark-skinned people who the prince is trying to kill off. And so you have Dick Grayson be able to help out those people. Now, after doing that, it's also Dick asking them to help him out to get inside the prince's home or castle so that he is able to interrogate the prince. And the thing is, Dick Grayson does get that help. But right after you have Dick Grayson be able to find a pathway that supposedly leads him into the home of the prince, he is knocked out from behind by the same guy he just saved, the same guy who promised to help him take out the prince. And we come to find out, the guy said, listen, they were going to kill me and my family earlier. And so I'm kind of wondering if I give you over to them, will they then leave me alone and also my family? Now, for Dick Grayson, he's kind of in luck here because even though you have the prince take off his mask, the prince has no idea what Dick Grayson looks like. And so you have Dick Grayson kind of pretend that he's somebody who's working for, well, Dick Grayson. And so you have the prince say, you know what? I know the best way to handle you, the best way to deal with you. And so we kind of find out that they took Dick Grayson over to the pit. Now, this pit is really important because they're going to throw some honey down there. And with the honey being down there, of course, it's going to attract the rats. With the rats coming out, they're kind of hoping that it'll eat Nightwing alive. Now, we also kind of find out that Dick Grayson is not the only person in the pits. It's also the Prime Minister, the prince's father. Now, this is where we learn everything that's going on inside this country and their connection to the Graysons. So we do learn that apparently there was a prince, and this prince was very young. Now, he had a scar on his face, but his father was killed off. So we get the idea that with the death of his father, it automatically made the prince become the new ruler of the country. Now, we do learn here the prime minister right now is not the actual father of the prince we're talking about. These are two different people completely. And with that being said, when it comes to the prime minister, he hated the idea that his country was being led by a young boy who was horribly scarred a while back. And so we kind of find out the prime minister also had a child, a young boy as well. And so what he did was he also scarred his son. His game plan was to get rid of the current prince and replace the prince with his son. And it actually worked out, all because of the Graysons. Let me explain. And really not because of the Graysons, because who they work for, because remember, the Graysons were part of a circus, and that circus came over to this country to do a show. But when they had arrived, you had the prime minister and a few other people be able to work together to get rid of the current prince by, well, tricking him into a different tent. And so while they had killed off the other prince, the Graysons saw what happened. Now, the Graysons, they stayed quiet, but yeah, they saw someone get murdered. Now, after you had the prince die off, you did have this prime minister put his son in the role as the current prince of the country, and you did have the prince say, you know what? Let my father be the prime minister. It was a complete takeover. The problem is that the way he raised his son had become so corrupt, so evil. And so now his goal is to hopefully stop his son before his son can kill off innocent people across the country and do even more corrupt things in the country or possibly around the world. Now, while you had Dick Grayson the entire time hearing that story, he was trying his best to get the heck out of that, well, prison. And luckily for him, he was able to get out of that prison, but to also be able to get the prime minister out as well before he was eaten alive by, well, the rats down there. Now, once you have Dick Grayson be able to escape with the prime minister and also take out the guard, it does seem like for Dick Grayson, everything should be good now, and he should be able to find the prince. The problem is that he's then confronted by a different guard who just goes ahead and just shoots Dick Grayson multiple times. But as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, we pick up with Dick Grayson showing us that he is okay because the brand new suit is bulletproof. So he is able to actually take those shots, get right back up, and fight against the guy who is doing the shooting. But here comes the problem though. You see, the prime minister, he got shot. And so right now, he's down for the moment. Now, you do have Dick Grayson be able to take the guy out and begin to help out the prime minister. Now, here's the thing. The prince has not told the people in his country that his father, the prime minister, is a traitor. And so because he has not done that, the prime minister was able to get a flight out of the country. And you did have our two characters be able to get back over to Gotham City. Now, once they do arrive back into Gotham City, you did have the prime minister be taken away over to a nearby hospital to get that bullet wound checked out. Now, he does tell Dick, like, hey, listen, I want to talk to you later on once I'm able to actually talk to you. And so you have Dick agree to wait for the man to actually recover. But let's not forget about the whole idea of Miggy, because she did call Dick Grayson earlier when he was on the other side of the world. And so for Dick Grayson, he's kind of like, you know what? Let me go ahead and see what in the world is going on with her. So once he does get back home, get a hold of her on the phone, she tells him like, hey, it's my father. He is a very abusive man once he had a few drinks inside of him. And so right now, it's Dick Grayson realizing that her father is abusive and she needs his help. The problem is that when he tries to leave, he's once again confronted by good old Bernie once again. Now, this time, the battle does go a tad bit different for Dick Grayson, where he's able to easily take out Bernie. Now, at first, the battle does seem like an even match, but this is Dick Grayson finally getting back into that Nightwing role all over again. So you have Dick be able to easily take out Bernie and move on with his day. So now his main goal is to go check up on Miggy. And so for Dick Grayson, on his way over to the home of Miggy, he's on the phone with her, and she's still being attacked by her father. Now, apparently, her father now has her at gunpoint, her and her mother. He's getting very abusive. But by the time you have Dick Grayson be able to get there to hopefully help out, he hears a gunshot. He's kind of like, oh my God, I'm too late. What exactly went down? Except when he walks in, he comes to find out, Miggy is okay. And so is her mother. But her father is dead. She got the gun and she shot the man. And so you have Dick say, you know what? I will do anything to get the kind of help you need. And so, you know, the cops arrive and everyone go their separate ways. So it kind of seems like the story is officially done, but it's not yet. Because we have to remember that he was told earlier to check in on the prime minister once he got help at the hospital. So now you have Dick Grayson go over there to figure out, hey, listen, are you guys responsible for the death of my parents? And so for Dick Grayson, he finds out here that no, they weren't. That basically his parents killed off by Zuko, and that was it. Now, they were thinking about killing off the Graysons, but then they heard the Graysons had died. And so they left everything alone. And they also said, like, hey, we were not going to kill them at all. And the reason why, because they were innocent people. And so for Dick Grayson, this case is officially closed. Now, the book kind of ends on a good note. And what I mean by that statement is that you have Dick Grayson meeting up with Batman. Now, when you have the two characters be able to meet up with one another, it's really more of Dick Grayson saying, I'm sorry. Now, the reason I'm saying I'm sorry because earlier in the book, it was Dick saying, like, you know what? I was unable to be my old man because of you, Bruce, because I was always trying to be like you. But it's also Dick realizing that Bruce was not trying to force Dick to be like him. Matter of fact, it was Bruce saying, like, be your old man, but at the same time, here are the skills you need to be a hero out in the field. But it's also Dick realizing that Bruce gave him love in a different type of way, but Bruce gave him love. And the same goes for Alfred as well. And so it's Dick kind of apologizing, but it's also Dick saying, like, I'm not done yet being a hero. Like, it's now time for me to have a new beginning somewhere else in the world. And so this leads into his first actual ongoing series where he does go over to Bloodhaven. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.